as those controls are how we discovered many of the violations, and those controls also provided strong compliance education to staff, students, and to boosters. Let me be clear. Today is a sad day for the entire Ole Miss family. My heart breaks for the young men in our football program who displayed such resolve and focus in competing this season, despite knowing that there would be no postseason opportunity for them. And now the NCAA has unfairly punished these young men who have already been through so much. We will fight for them and appeal. I want to thank Ross Bjork for his leadership throughout this entire process and for fighting for Ole Miss. And I want to thank Coach Matt Luke for setting an example of character for our student athletes. I'm going to now turn things over to Ross Bjork.
Thank you, Chancellor Vitter. Thanks for being here this afternoon. This is obviously a very tough day for the university and our football program. Based on the decision from the Committee on Infractions earlier today, the young men in our football program who have already suffered so much will continue to feel the effects of this case. As was mentioned by the Chief Hearing Officer earlier today, our corrective action showed how serious we took this case. We self-imposed very meaningful penalties and took appropriate action to take responsibility for the actions that resulted in violations. The committee accepted all of our self-imposed penalties and determined that our case was a level 1 standard case. However, we are in strong disagreement over the addition of the 2018 postseason ban and plan to launch the appeal right away. We believe that today's decision from the committee is an excessive application of the penalty structure, and the citing of previous University of Mississippi infractions cases from more than 30 years ago is not applicable to our current case. Considering that we are one of only 3 SEC institutions that went more than 20 years without a major infractions matter, this is a gross misapplication of the charge of lack of institutional control. The question is, when does a university get a clean slate in the infractions process? There are many factors that call into question the procedures of this case and the credibility of evidence that was presented at the hearing. We plan to restate those facts in our appeal materials. There are other aspects of the case that we will also appeal, and we will determine the specifics of those matters in the next few days. From the very beginning, our approach to the investigation has been consistent. We focused upon 2 things. First, when we uncovered facts that were violations, we took appropriate and decisive action based upon those facts. Second, when facts did not support allegations or we felt the process was unfair, we challenged the NCAA. We indicated our disagreement in very forceful and strategic aspects as evidenced by our numerous filings, letters, and pushback over the past few years. Something changed in the spring and summer of 2016, and we strongly disagree with the tactics used by the enforcement staff to keep us isolated in the final months of the investigation. This will also be a basis for our appeal. Our responsibility to compliance has been and always will be the cornerstone of Ole Miss athletics, as evidenced by our consistent proactive approach to compliance, rules education, and monitoring. I'm grateful for Chancellor Vitter's unwavering leadership and support through this entire process. He exemplifies a steadfast commitment to integrity that permeates every aspect of our university. We are here for our student athletes in our 18 sports, and that mission will not change. Since we are digesting the full report, there are many things that we may not have answers for today. We wish that this were over, but there is more work to be done, and that work has already started. Now I believe we'll take questions.
Chancellor Vitter, based on everything that's transpired in the last 5 years, do you feel the NCAA is corrupt?
let me answer more specifically. You can draw your own conclusions. I think something happened, quite frankly, about a year and a half ago, just before the draft night from 2016. The course of this investigation changed. The entire conduct went from one of cooperation to one where we were shut out, where information that should have been obvious to pursue, that we would have certainly noticed and followed up on, was not. And by the time the facts became known to us, that information was no longer available because of the time-sensitive nature. That's an example where we could have been led to an entirely different conclusion on some very key matters. So I really am very upset about the way that this process was conducted. It was unfair. It was not appropriate for our university, for our student athletes.
Ross, what wins will you guys have to vacate?
That is still being determined. Again, we're just digesting the full report, and so we're not exactly sure until we go through each of the findings, if you will, and determine the seasons. We know some, but until we go through the final report, we're not exactly sure the vacation of wins yet.
This is for Ross or the Chancellor. You talked about April or the spring of 2016. Was there a moment that the tenor and the tone changed with the NCAA? Was there an interaction, a specific instance that you thought this is going in a different direction?
Well, roughly at that time was the draft night, although I think the change actually happened shortly before that. And it was just the situation where we were not apprised of situations that the NCAA was concerned about. So we could not conduct our own investigation. We could not provide relevant information, and we were not given access to the sources of information that the NCAA was looking at. That is grossly unfair.
This question is for Ross. There was in the original notice of allegations, the committee came out and said that you guys didn't exhibit exemplary cooperation. Today on the conference call, Greg Christopher said that both the university and also former head coach Hugh Freeze did exemplary cooperation. What's going on with all of that? Because it's kind of confusing.
Well, I think to their credit, they acknowledge, the resources that were spent on this case, the time that it has taken to get information on the table. And I think a lot of it, again, was really self-discovered by our institution, by our compliance program. And so they did not cite exemplary cooperation. So I don't understand how people feel. We did cooperate because we pushed back. We made sure that everything we did was based on fact. And if there were violations, we took action. And if there were disagreements, that we did push back. So exemplary cooperation is only one strategy in the overall tone